Hello, I'm Sharon Young, President of Global Housing Foundation. Welcome to the Global Housing Foundation's Shelter of Hope, rebuilding Ukrainian families, one home at a time. Global Housing Foundation, in partnership with the UN Habitat, facilitates alliances between public, private, academic, foundational, community, and governmental organizations designed to develop and leverage their power and effectiveness for the common cause of providing innovative solutions for workforce housing challenges. We are honored to welcome a distinguished panel of the world's leading experts who will highlight the critical importance surrounding sustainability and the pressing need for workforce housing throughout the world, and more specifically in areas of crisis such as the Ukraine. During this program, we will embark on a journey of compassion and solidarity, and we will also delve into the remarkable efforts to provide homes for Ukrainian families in need. We will share how the Global Housing Foundation has begun a transformative journey, funding the construction of homes for Ukrainian families with a special emphasis on empowering women through property ownership. Our commitment is to uplift Ukrainian families through these transformative initiatives. We will also reveal how you can join us in championing sustainability and the building of innovative workforce housing. Together, we can create a brighter future for those in need, making a lasting impact on lives for generations. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge our board, who have brought us together today and continue to advocate for continued conversation. Our chairperson emeritus, Owen Gwynn, Debbie Frank Peterson, Robin Frank, Colette Frankel, Frank Young, and Alyssa Nightingale. Now I would like to introduce our host, Pulitzer Prize journalist and New York Times bestseller author of more than a dozen books, Ellis Hennigan.
It's the Global Housing Foundation Shelter of Hope. I'm Ellis Hennigan. So happy to have you with us today. We have a jam-packed program ahead, all of it dealing with the tremendous challenges of trying to provide decent housing for people around the globe in greatest need. Nowhere is that need more severe than in Ukraine right now, more than a year into a bloody fighting war zone that seems not to end, that has had such horrific impact on the civilians of that suffering nation. And the Global Housing Foundation right there, dealing on the ground with these very difficult issues and trying to solve the real problems that real people face. This, of course, is a program in coordination with UN Habitat. One of the great things about the Global Housing Foundation is the way that it interacts with so many other sectors of modern society, governmental organizations, charitable groups and foundations, religious institutions, academic programs, the public and the private sector, all leveraging their special influence and talents into one organized, integrated whole, dealing with some of these very, very perplexing issues. We have an amazing array of people joining us today. Wade McGuinn and Robert McAllister joining us from Kyiv, Alex Stipora and Chris Baxter reporting on their own efforts in that war-torn capital. Michael Ben Ali, the founder of the Sustainability Laboratory, has been a pioneer in fresh thinking on issues connected to sustainability in all its in all its many forms. Farzana Gandhi, one of the most creative architectural voices in this field. And we'll be hearing more from Sharon Young at the Global Housing Foundation. Key to the mission of the Global Housing Foundation is working across many different platforms, whether that be government or the private sector, or educational institutions, religious groups, foundations, anyone who is focused or at least willing to be focused on the many challenges of housing around the world, and finding creative ways to leverage those different organizations, their own knowledge and strengths, taking advantage of the experience that different folks have had. That's really where the added power in these efforts comes from. One such effort in one such very difficult place, Ukraine, being led by the Global Housing Foundation and its private sector and foundation religious nonprofit partners, is pushing ahead in a very exciting way right now in that war zone in Ukraine. Joining us to talk about that, Wade McGuinn is the CEO of McGuinn Homes, whose charitable arm is Next Generation Ministries. Well, also Dr. Robert McAllister, who represents Realis Charitable Foundation in Kyiv, Ukraine, and Sharon Young, president of the Global Housing Foundation. Good of all you three to join us today.
Hey, good morning.
Great to be with you.
Yeah, good to have you. So I am so excited to get right down to the details of some of the work that you guys have undertaken in this very difficult environment. Wade, why don't you get us started a little bit and tell us how it is that you got focused on Ukraine? There's need all around the world, and what it is that you're hoping to accomplish there.
Well, thank you, Ellis. I got invited to go on a trip to meet some of the representatives from Realis in Ukraine. My background was doing disaster relief services around the world from a construction perspective, since my business in the United States is residential construction and development. And I've been volunteering for about 30 years, been in most of the third world country places in the world, but I'd never been invited into a war zone or a first world country disaster. So going to Ukraine was quite a challenge. So we were able to fly into Poland, go over to Kyiv, and then with some transportation provided by Realis, we were actually able to go out to some of the war zones in Irpin and beyond those areas and see some of the devastation that had happened to the citizenship there, where bombs had exploded and either completely destroyed their housing and their lives, or the stuff that we were able to speak into was the collateral damage that bombs and missiles had created by blowing out doors and windows and blowing the roofs off houses and roof sheathing. And looking at the work that Realis had already started, which was two things. One, that they had been hiring really high quality remodeling contractors. There's still quite a robust supply chain there. And they were able to replace doors and windows and roof sheathing and shingles on houses that were still stable. And then they were also trying to partnering with people that were actually making modular type housing. So our organization, Next Generation, had put up some grant money to deploy some of the remodeling contractors and to deploy some of the mobile housing. And then I went out to the field to see what that looked like in the field. And really quite unexpectedly, I knew I was going into Ukraine. I didn't really realize we were going into a war zone as much as we were to hear actual sirens every night from where we were sleeping. But you know, it was, if I had to do it over again, I would do it again. Robbie and the team just got back in October. I had just had some surgery, so I didn't get to go. But I have to say that what I saw there was different than any place I've ever been for several reasons. One is that the quality of the material workmanship was the best I'd ever seen. Number two, that there's a robust supply chain there that I'd never seen when we were doing disaster relief. And number three, the low cost of being able to achieve all this. This is about half of the cost that I have seen in South America or Mexico where we've worked, or through the Caribbean and Haiti. And so
Interesting.
I was quite impressed with everything that Realis was doing.
Interesting. So, Robert, it's tough enough to build a home in South Carolina or somewhere in the United States or in Europe. Talk about some of the special challenges of doing it right in a hot war zone.
Well, for me, Ellis, again, thank you for having me on. I had the privilege of living in Kiev for 10 years back in the 90s and 2000s, and just became endeared to the people there. One thing that we realized very early on working with Ukrainians is that they're very industrious people. They love their homeland. They are not looking for a handout. They're looking for a hand up. And if we just come alongside them and partner with them, we're able to help them. Of course, due to the war, the latest figures I saw were between 110 and 120,000 residences have been destroyed, 18 to 20,000 high-rise apartment buildings. And what that's led to is about 1.5 to 2 million people that have lost their homes. And one thing that I really have appreciated about Global Housing is that they work with the people that are the most vulnerable. We know that millions and millions have been displaced. Many have gone out of the country and moved to Europe and even to our country. And yet there are many left behind that aren't able to move, to migrate. Disabled, elderly, single moms with children. And Global Housing has a commitment to identify those that are the most vulnerable and go in and provide a place for them to live in the midst of a very, very difficult situation. And so it's just a privilege to be a part of that. And Realis, of course, is a network that we've developed over the decades since we've been there, and they're trusted partners. And of course, that's very important to have trusted partners on the ground. They're able to vet, they're able to work with municipalities and other NGOs to make sure that we're getting to those that are the most needy and have the most to lose. And of course, it's a cold climate. It's already freezing there. And so by providing housing, even simple housing, you're providing a place for people and you're saving lives. That's really what's happening. So it's a wonderful opportunity to be a part of that. And I'm just thankful to be a part of that.
So,
And Ellis, if you don't mind, I'd like to add just to say that when we were there, we visited refugee camps. And this work that Global Housing is taking on is the opposite of refugee camps. We saw some of the highest quality refugee camps that there ever were in terms of the quality of everything from the food to the shelter to the beds, everything, but they're refugees. They've left their communities and there's no clear path how to get back. Global Housing has a clear path to keep communities and allow people to rebuild their lives, regardless how difficult the circumstances are in the places where they have been for generations.
And the perfect segue to Sharon Young. Talk a little bit, if you will, about the importance of housing in a war zone. So many bad things happen. There is so much need, but housing plays a special role that often stands in the way of all those other needs. Am I right?
Well, yes, you are, Ellis. But the one thing that Global Housing always emphasizes is that we give hope. And they're under enough stress, both adults and children. And there are many issues there. But the home, and as my mother would say, home is wherever you hang your hat. But to have a home helps stabilize not only the physical needs, but also the mental needs.
But there is a difference, isn't there, between a real home, a home that a family can consider its own, and even a well-run, well-funded refugee camp. Why is a home so special?
Well, the home is the nucleus of a family, and they already have a great deal of destruction. And so having a home that is theirs, is deeded to them, gives that sense of belonging. So it's just a wonderful, incredible advantage of owning a home, a sense of security.
Now, Wade, there's got to be some difference between the kind of housing that is appropriate in a war-torn place like Ukraine is today, from the kind of houses that most Americans or Europeans or Asians would be familiar with. Is there something special about the houses you guys are producing?
Yeah, I think what Global Housing and Realis are doing is using local materials to build local type housing. So even in the modular plants where they're bringing in logs right out of the forest and they're building it into a completed product there, that you're not interrupting a supply chain with outside supplies, which is strengthening small business in Ukraine. Also, as the factories expand to meet the need, as the war expands, refugees are actually being hired and trained in these plants. And so it's job creation. And so imagine that you've got a whole supply chain that's being fortified. You're job training refugees and creating jobs at a time of war, and you're supplying indigenous type housing that people really, really like. We went out to the field to see people that were already living in these homes. And some of them had even started adding on to them so that they could have intergenerational families move in, which is pretty common in Ukraine. Just very, very impressive. Also, the cost is about half of what I've seen in South America, the Caribbean, and even in Haiti, which is amazing because it's much, much higher quality and much, much lower cost. And so between the supply chains issue, the cost, the job training, the product and the work that Realis is doing with Global Housing is, I've got 36 years experience in this, and it's the best I've ever seen.
Now, Robert, if I walk through one of these houses, what would surprise me? What would be different from what you think most people would be expecting?
Well, what surprised us when we went to the first one we went to was we walked in and we opened the door, and forgive me if I get a little emotional. There was a little girl that was about 12 years old sitting at a desk with her laptop or iPad, and she was connected to the internet and doing her schoolwork in a warm room that right next door to the modular house was a complete pile of rubble that had been their home prior to the war. And so to see the smile on her face and the fact that she is able to continue her studies right in the middle of a war gives us hope for the next generation, because that's one of the problems that you face in a situation like this. You have displacement, which produces trauma, which produces complete disintegration of societal processes like education and stability. And so to be able to provide that for these families allows them to have some sense of normalcy even in the middle of chaos. So I think it was very wonderful.
Do you have a fear that you're going to make all this effort, go to all this trouble, bring in all these resources, build this nice house, and then it'll just get blown up?
Are you asking me that question?
I mean, do you fear that your work will be undone by the next round of bomb or the next attack? Or, I mean, bad things are still happening in that country, right?
There's always that concern, I guess. But I think for us, just the present need and the immediate opportunity to provide stability and care for these people is worth the risk. The way we look at it, it's worth the risk. The chances are that it won't happen, that they will stay intact. So I would say the risk is worth the effort.
Interesting. Very good way to very good way to put it. Yes, jump in here, Sharon.
Okay. I was going to say, you asked a perfect question there, because of the houses that are being built right now that Global Housing and our group with who we're visiting with today. The houses are designed that if the war zone gets closer to that area, those houses can be pulled up with a crane and moved out. They are absolutely movable. That was very important to Global Housing because the question you asked was the question I asked originally. And once I saw how that house can be moved and placed somewhere else, you have a much better chance of that house not moving whatsoever. But should it need moved, it can be moved.
Interesting.
And
So
I
you
will
guys
say
have
from a
thought through.
construction
Yeah, go ahead.
standpoint,
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Ellis, just to punctuate what Sharon's saying is, you would, when you go up and you see these houses, and I'm sure you'll be showing some clips, these houses don't give the appearance that they're mobile. This is a very, very substantial structure, but they are quite mobile. And so they can readily be moved, and local Ukrainians have the equipment to move them. So it does fit the global housing guidelines. And at the same time, it's not a trailer. It's a very substantial, great quality home.
Isn't that interesting? You know, I am so fascinated by the way different parts of society are working together on these efforts, right? You've got a role the government is playing, a role that the religious and charitable world is playing here, a role that business, of course, is playing. I'd love to hear from each of you a little perspective on how it is that such disparate organizations are able to work together on a challenge like this one. Sharon, why don't you start us off? This is not something that any one sector can do alone, is it?
No, it's much better if you have a group working together. It is just imperative to have people that you trust, that you bring different ideas. It is a real pleasure to work as a group than setting and trying to do it all by yourself. So it's been a real, absolutely great miracle that we work perfectly together because our goal is the same at the end of the day, and that is taking care of the people that are the neediest.
Interesting. But now, Wade, you're originally a home builder. I mean, you're a guy who comes out of the private sector. Do you find yourself pulling your hair out sometime with some bureaucratic answer, or the fact that these other parts of the world operate differently? How do you deal with that when you're in the field?
Well, we enjoyed the challenge, and to just capitalize on what Sharon was saying, you know, when mission and vision align, it doesn't make any difference about background, religious, secular, political. If you've got alignment on mission and vision, it makes it easy. And then to what Robbie said earlier, that I have a picture of that little girl on her iPad doing school. And that gives me hope every day. We could talk about statistics all day long. And really it boils down to one. If it was your daughter, your wife, your family, it would make a difference. And when all these diverse groups get together and the alignment is to help people directly in meaningful ways, the mission just gets blessed and becomes robust. And this is one of those times where I just really am we look for, I'm a business guy, so I look for return on investment. And that includes in charity. We don't give money away to watch it burn. We want to see somebody benefit from it. We want to see somebody get better from it. And to what Robbie said earlier, we're not giving a handout. We want our investment to be a handout. So if there's not a clear path for a better future, then we need to get realignment. And Realis and Global Housing were a great fit for our company and Next Generation because we're perfectly aligned in those areas.
Yeah, I find that, Robert, I find that so interesting. I mean, you do have Realis, Next Generation, the Global Housing Foundation, right? Each coming from its own perspective in a way. Have you found that to be a source of strength, occasional frustration? What have you learned from those other organizations?
Well, I would say I agree with Wade 100%. Once vision and mission align, and when you're in a crisis like this, it's all hands on deck. And I would say that's one thing about Ukrainian people. They are much a communal society. And when something like a war breaks out, everybody is helping everybody. And The Realis team has individuals on the staff that can go in and liaison with municipalities and municipal leaders, and then they create own ramps for us to get in and help us identify the neediest people and areas that are maybe off the radar of what typical people are doing. And so I think it all just fits together. You build trust over time. And I'll give you an example. The most recent one that Global Housing built. I mean, I was there 2 weeks ago, and we went from identifying a family, under Global Housing's guidelines, to deployment of the house in less than a month. I mean, it began with a conversation and went from a tree in a forest to a deployed home with a family of 4 generations of women, the oldest of which, by the way, is 87 and remembers the last time her home was destroyed was in 1942 when the Nazis destroyed her village during World War II. And she told us when we were there, she said, "I'm so thankful that I now have my last home that I'm going to live in." And so you just can't write a script for that. And so when all of these groups come together and at this level of cooperation, it creates a synergy that just goes way, way beyond, facts and figures.
Well, I love that 1 month turnaround timetable. That sounds that's beyond anything you see even in the private sector anywhere that I'm familiar with. I'm interested to know how you guys have connected with each other, coming from a different world. Sharon, how did you connect with these guys? How did you round them up? How did they find you?
Well, a mutual friend of Robert and mine introduced Robert and me, and we had coffee. And after having coffee and talking, we realized that we both have the same passion and desire and to help the needy. So we found that our goals at the end of the day were completely in alignment with each other. So, and the rest is history, because Robert knew Wade, and so did the mutual friend of Robert and mine. So now we just all are a wonderful group that I would say would be pretty unbeatable.
Well, I'm always. Did you guys? Do we get general assent on that at the table? I hope. I'm always interested in how these successful operations can scale. Right? It's one thing to build a few houses in one location, but I'm eager to learn about what lessons you all have learned that might either enable you all to do this on a continuing and a growing scale, or to create models that others can duplicate in other tough places around the world. Wade, do you want to take a crack at that one? Are there some larger issues here that you all are coming away with?
Ellis, one of the things that we do at Next Generation is we actually go out to the field and we do a lot of investigation before we deploy capital. And so because we are looking for a return on that investment. And one of the main things we look for as we were preparing to go to, I went last October, was to see both sustainability and the ability to scale. And so there's no doubt in my mind, because you got wartime and then you got post-war. So during the wartime, I think we could do quite a bit, and post-war we can do even more. And so I'm pleased to say that as long as we keep attracting good capital partners and donors, that it is very, very scalable. As a matter of fact, the more you scale it, the better it is for Ukraine in general, because it's creating jobs, it's creating supply chain. I've been just about everywhere on the planet. I've never seen people as hopeful as Ukrainians are. I wouldn't want to have a Ukrainian for an enemy, because they stick together and they believe in freedom like we do. And I'm just, it really, for us at Next Generation, they check every box.
Interesting. Robert, you guys could do more of this, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. We're just getting started. And, for me, to be brutally honest, it's really the human issue for me. just giving hope and love, like Sharon was talking about, to the people. They're so precious. They've had such a hard history in Ukraine. And I will just go on record as saying they do have their own distinct and unique culture and people, their own language, their own literature, their own history, and their commonality there. And they do deserve to be able to be their own country that can be deciding for themselves and have self-determination for their future. And it's just tragic what's happened. It is a complicated situation, but there's no question to me that we need to stay the course. And while we engage and help meet the immediate need of housing and caring for those that are hurting, we also need to have a long-term view of a free and independent Ukraine that will join the rest of the world in producing a peaceful and productive and better society for everyone.
So Sharon Young, one of the things that I'm noticing as we dive into these examples is the prominent role that women seem to keep playing. Many of these households seem to be headed by women, multi-generation of women sometimes. Is that purposeful?
Well, one of the goals of the 17 goals from the UN Habitat is the empowerment of women. And so the one thing that Global Housing has certainly done is, one, the woman must be given the deed, which gives very much stability to the home and for the children. In addition to that, we have the people in the Ukraine on the ground that's building with the construction company, and it just so happens that is also a woman partner in that. And yes, because one of the goals of the UN Habitat is to empower women. So it's just been a perfect fit.
Interesting. I guess if women are there, the kids they're not going to push the kids out on the street or abandon the house as long as there's a family intact there. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Interesting. So as we wrap up today, I'm so eager to hear about what others might do. I can imagine that there are people watching us all around the globe today, and they're thinking, wow, they seem like they're doing some pretty good stuff there. They seem to have settled on a model of working together across these different sectors. They're have their hands around some processes that might be able to scale to a larger degree. Robert, if someone is watching us and thinking to themselves, gee, I'd like to be helpful, is there something I can do other than nodding along? What might you suggest?
Well, I think a very important thing is to go to Global Housing's website and follow their links and get involved. I think Realis, of course, has multiple programs that they're involved in. They're doing trauma mitigation. They're doing, other humanitarian kinds of work, educational work. But this is a very, very current and urgent need, is to provide the housing. And so one way to get involved is to support the efforts of Global Housing and through that, the partners that they have in Ukraine. And so that would be my recommendation.
Interesting. Sharon, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, we on our website, you can go certainly into globalhousing.org, and we do have on that site where you can donate money, and the money that is donated for this project will totally go 100% to the Ukraine to build houses for the working poor and the truly needed people. And I mean, that's 100% of all donations that we are receiving from this conference.
Interesting. And Wade, I'm eager to hear more about what the future of this program is. You as a guy who comes out of the home building world and the real business side of this, but then spending so much of your time and effort on these global efforts. Where do you see the future here?
Well, that's great. That's what we're all about. We've for 38 years, we've run our business as a mission. We've reinvested the capital from private enterprise into helping people all over the globe. And what I would say to anybody that gets an opportunity to be a part of this discussion that we're having right now is that you're not investing in an organization, you're not investing in an idea, you're investing in the next generation of a family. You know, the enemy is trying to destroy the next generation of Ukraine. And what Global Housing and Realis are doing is creating safe environments for this next generation to grow and lean into as they come out of the war.
Interesting. Robert, how would you answer the same question? What do you see the future here to be?
Well, we're really hoping that, you know, the war will end and Ukrainians can get back to some sense of normalcy. I agree 100% with Wade. I think every house that's built provides stability, provides hope, and provides people with an opportunity to, you know, every family wants the same thing for their families. They want stability, they want opportunity, they want education. And so one thing we hadn't talked about a whole lot, but, you know, one of our priorities is to locate houses on the property where they're already living. These are for people that are not necessarily migrating. And so it doesn't disrupt them, you know, like having to migrate would. And so they're able to grow up not only in a stable and safe environment, but also in the communities that their families have lived in for generations. And so it just creates that stability and that encouragement of the next generation to lead into the future. And I think, to be brutally honest, I think what's happening in Ukraine is a very, very important moment in history. Not only the history of that region, but the history of the world. You know, it really speaks to the kind of society we want to have. Do we want to have a freedom and democracy society or an autocracy and dictatorship society? And I think that's where we are, and doing the work we're doing hopefully will lead to the former, not the latter.
That's an inspiring answer. Sharon, we pick it up from there. What do you see next for this project and beyond for the Global Housing Foundation?
Well, Global Housing's mission is to give hope and give the opportunity to own their own home. So that, I think, will always be a challenge, and there's always going to be a lot of work. So we must do what we can and be prepared to do it. And it's great to have partners to participate with, because it makes it so much easier to get all of the goals we can get accomplished in record time.
Wade McGuinn, Robert McAllister, Sharon Young, very good of you to join us and bring us inside this ground level effort in one of the most difficult patches of real estate on planet Earth. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Good conversation. Thank you all again. Okay. The Global Housing Foundation, with its diverse array of partners, bringing innovative solutions to some of the toughest housing issues around the world. Here's a closer look.
Ukraine is facing its biggest crisis since World War II due to Russia's invasion. Over 2,000 towns and villages are affected by conflict or occupied. Around 120,000 houses and 18,000 apartments are ruined, making nearly 1.8 million families lose their homes. The cost? About 56 billion, and the full damage is still unknown. Marina, a young mother from Irpin, her daughter Darina and grandmother Maria are among those who lost their homes in March 2022.
Hi, my name is Andrei. I'm in Romanivka, a small village near Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. Behind me, a construction is underway. It's a new home that tells a story of 4 generations marked by war. The eldest member of this family, in her late 80s now, was only 5 years old when war gripped this region in 1941. She hoped that her great-granddaughter would never experience the same challenges. Sadly, history repeated itself. Now, thanks to the generous sponsorship of Global Housing, a new chapter begins for this resilient family of single women.
The story has a very tragic beginning.
6 березня наш будинок попав снаряд і він вигорів повністю. На протязі всього цього, це 1,5 року, майже вже 2 років, ми живемо то у одних людей жили, то у других. Зараз у третіх людей живемо. Я з дитям і бабушка, і це таскаємося.
Ой, це страшне. Я ту війну так не пам'ятаю, як оце. Та війна така не страшна, не така була страшна.
Ми просто втратили життя, повноцінне життя, нормальне життя.
The family was selected at the end of September and work quickly got underway.
Якось комусь розказати, бо я прям сама в це не вірила. Я не могла навіть розказати нікому про це. А я прям сьогодні підписала договір і кажу, сьогодні стовпчики вже заливають.
The construction of house was entrusted to experienced firm in the village Plesetsky in Kiev region. Last year, they already built dozens of modular houses that are quickly assembled on their recipient's site. Let's take a look in the production process. The enterprise has several plots with concrete hangars where construction can proceed regardless of the weather. Local timber is brought in for production. It's cut here. Also, it's dried in 2 chambers which are heated by production waste. Then the material is shaped as needed and 2 halves of the house are built from it. In less than 3 weeks, the house is ready. The enterprise's manager shows off their work, saying it's already set for installation. Meanwhile, little Darina practices her balance acts and plans how the furniture will be arranged in the new house.
Я можу даже показать сейчас, пройтися и показать, де ці комнати, якщо батьки дозволять, то буде. Ось тут, щоб кровать стояла. У мене тут буде столик стоять, і я знаю, які там у мене ще полочки будуть. А ось тут я буду грати. І ще б я хотіла, щоб мамина кімната була ось тут.
At the same time, Grandmother Maria is not idle. She is used to working and is busy in the garden. Then trucks with the house halves make their way along the narrow road to the family's plot. It is an emotional event. Construction masters somehow make their way through the street. There is a trouble. The gates are too narrow. But they have everything under control. The gates are dismantled and then just as easily reinstalled. It's all in a day's work. Darina can't wait to go inside. here she is, finally in her room. The time is wandering from house to house has ended.
Далі будемо проводити воду, ставити ліжка, будемо шторки ліпити, посуд вибирати. Будемо облаштовувати, щоб можна було повноцінно продовжити наше нормальне повноцінне життя. Своєму. Дуже дякуємо.
Standing here beside the complete house that cost around $20,000, it is obvious that at least one chapter of the story has been written. However, it's merely a drop in a bucket if you compare it to vast housing problems that many Ukrainians face today. We're profoundly grateful to Global Housing for financing this endeavor, and we urge you to contribute further so we could replicate this success story again and again.
Кинули сюди з літаків пару бомб, та і взагалі тут обстріл проходив, і снаряди з градів. Від взривної волни тут все майже було ушкоджено, все зруйновано, ви ж бачите.
My gosh, when it comes to Ukraine today, one of the biggest challenges is just knowing where to start. There is so much need and so much tragedy, and so much of it eventually comes back to issues related to housing. Here at the Global Housing Foundation, we're constantly on the lookout for people doing unique and innovative things around the world, especially in some of the world's toughest places. None of them any tougher these days than Ukraine. One such organization, Homers, these folks are right at the forefront of coming up with innovative and, yes, cost-effective solutions to house people in some truly challenging circumstances. Alex Sapora, the founder, and Chris Baxter, one of the board members there at Homer, joining us from Kyiv right now, where they have a fascinating project underway dealing with what have to be some of the most challenging housing issues anywhere on planet Earth. Guys, thank you so much for joining us from Kyiv.
It's our pleasure. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
So my goodness, can we start with the very basics? You guys have some innovative ideas about creating housing. How are the houses that you guys are creating different from the kind of houses that most people know around the world? What makes them special? Alex, why don't you begin?
The main reason why we started exactly this project, that because we never was in real estate business. So that's why we had no big background in conventional building construction where the concrete, bricks, etc., etc. Mm-hmm. So when exactly this happened, what happened in Ukraine, we faced the problem with where to invite people who left Kyiv when the war actually started. So the 40-50% of our employees escaped Kyiv because that was already a problem with accommodation. So they completely destroyed, I would say, demolished completely the houses and some districts around the Kyiv. So when we invited guys, employees, engineers to return to turn back to Kiev. So the first question was where to live. So at this moment we had the only plant for robots production. It's CNC machines, it's software developers, software systems, embedding systems, and that was no idea how to build according to conventional rules, conventional processes, etc.
So, Chris, was it an advantage, do you think, that you lacked those traditional experiences in the real estate development world? Would your ideas have been creative if you had had more history, do you think?
No, I think it's a very interesting point. I mean, I'm not the inventor here, Alex is. But when he contacted me soon after the war in early 2022, and he showed me the first prototype house that he had already built, I was astounded, actually, because as Alex said, I mean, 6 months earlier, he had not been in this business at all. And yet there I was looking at a video of a fully furnished, comfortable living accommodation ready to go. And I do think it's the case that he was able to come up with this concept because he was thinking, you know, as an engineer, as an inventor, but not as a traditional, you know, real estate guy. So he was, or a traditional construction guy. So he was kind of unconstrained, if you like, by, you know, the history of hundreds of years of conventional house building practices.
So Alex, can you give us a couple of specific examples of decisions that you made in designing these houses that are different from the ones that those hundreds of years of architects and builders have followed?
So modular prefab houses, it is not something new, actually. That was launched, this topic was launched many years ago, maybe 50, 60, 70 years ago. But the first problem we faced, how to build fast. And only, as I said, we had at this moment just CNC machines. Nobody applies CNC machines for production houses. It looks like absolutely weird idea. So that's odd, because CNC machines are really expensive tools, approaches for any kind of production. That's why we used to apply that for robot production. But we had nothing except CNC machines. That was, we managed to, we did not have any drawings, anything. We just had something on the napkins. And so that's all. So, wow. We made picture on the napkins. Next step was our engineers who manages CNC machines. They drag it under their hands and start produce that what we had. So that's why everything finally was connected really perfectly. That allowed us to assemble it really fast without big mistakes. Mm-hmm. The next was materials we applied in this case. It is not concrete, it should be really light, because the problem we faced in our case, it's a great migration. So nobody knew actually among the people where they are going to be in the months, in the 2 months, etc. So that's why we decided to produce something that is possibly really fast to remove, to shift from one place to another one. That is why it should be really easy assembled and disassembled. This is the next value our people came up with in our case exactly. So our house can be really fast for a few days assembled, produced and assembled, and at the same time disassembled and shifted to another location.
Now, Chris, what kind of reactions are you getting from the people who will be living in these houses? Are they surprised? Are they happy? Are they concerned? What reaction are you getting?
Well, probably the most important reaction that I've had in that respect is the one from my wife, actually, because I am now living in one of these houses myself.
Oh my goodness! Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah,
What did
we
she
brought.
think?
Yes, she was, I think, a little bit skeptical to begin with, but she is now very surprised at how kind of comfortable, modern, but also I think in a way quite cool it is to sort of live in this property. Actually, we had the first house brought to the UK in July. 4 trucks arrived from Kiev. It's a 6-module home. It was stunningly put up in my garden, as Alex said, in sort of a week and a half, roughly. And it's quite a dramatic look to it. And it's very comfortable living accommodation. And we've been in it for 4 months now. And actually, it's a little bit like being sort of almost permanently on holiday, actually. So it's ticking a lot of boxes.
So, Alex, these designs, how specific are they to the particular circumstances of war-torn Ukraine? Will they scale? Will they work other places? Will the designs apply to housing challenges elsewhere?
In the beginning, when we understood we should produce it really fast, that was not question of architecture and design, etc. It's gonna be just easy and fast producing, assembling, etc. So, and exactly these houses we installed for first people who are living anywhere and did not have any accommodation. So finally, we installed the first houses exactly on that foundations that they have after their houses were demolished. So, and it was a lot of different issues we faced those moments, because that was just first examples. For example, in one case, and then in a couple of weeks, we installed our first houses. I had a call from one family, and they said they have full house of ants. So the ants decided that it was built for them, not for people. So that was the problem with some specific materials we used to, and some construction and solutions we applied, having no experience in constructing. Next stage, that was we understood. And by the way, among the first people who financed our first houses was Chris's mother, Mrs. Baxter
Senior.
Yeah, she gave money for the family in Chernigov. So they are happy now, really. It's a quite big family with many children, etc. So next, after several months, as we understood, this is the trend, and we understood that in the future, this is the only case when all real estate will be produced inside of the plants, because the most energy will lose while constructing, while building, will lose absorbed outdoor while we constructing outside of the plant, because it takes time to wait for relevant weather, temperature, etc. So we should warm concrete, etc. So that's why we understood this is not just like randomly appeared technology, this is really future. That's why we redesigned our house, and we have concept. It has to be really convenient for people. So we have indoor. It's quite small house. It's like 50, 60, 70 square meters inside, and the same space outside. That's going to be really convenient for people to be outside, to see the horizon, and to feel the air, everything. I think it's really healthy story.
Maybe now, you guys. Let me ask you something that jumps into my mind. You have essentially a new factory that you have opened, right? Tell a little about that.
Yeah, we just actually came to Kiev from Slovakia, where we opened the new factory inside Europe. We had our opening ceremony on Thursday of last week, and we will be starting production there right around year end. So we're very excited about that. We chose to build in Slovakia because for a couple of reasons, actually. We think from the investor's point of view, people will be a little bit more comfortable putting money to work, inside the European Union, whilst Ukraine is still kind of tied up in this horrible conflict. But of course, we're very close to the Kiev border, so we should be able to service the Ukraine rebuilding demand, which we, of course, anticipate will really take off very soon after, the much hoped for resolution of the conflict itself. But, to your earlier question, I think from my point of view, when I first saw this product, I sort of immediately realized that the application was far beyond, just rehousing the displaced Ukrainians, even though that is an enormous opportunity in and of itself. I think we all know that affordable housing is in need all over the world. And actually, as we started to look at the product more closely, it's not just a social solution. It's also has a very interesting application in the business world. We're speaking to people moving into what's called the glamping sector, which is a sort of upgraded form of camping, where they provide, comfortable accommodation on their sort of holiday sites for tourists and so on. And the price point, together with the quality of this kind of construction, makes it very compelling from a businessman's point of view, actually, to invest in these kind of facilities and then make them available on Airbnb or other kinds of market platforms. And, when you run the numbers, of course, if you've got lower capital cost and you've got a very nice product, you end up making a better return on your investment.
Sure. Well, Chris, you better be careful. I may be showing up in your garden sometime soon.
You're very welcome.
And I hope you'll give me a good Airbnb rate when I arrive. So finally, but before we go, one of the things that we are always interested in here at the Global Housing Foundation is the interaction between government, NGOs, private investors. It sounds to me like you guys are an example of an organization working across those different platforms. And I want to know what lessons you've learned about how you can create an organization that does some good, that serves a need, but is also an attractive investment for people like Chris's mom, perhaps, who are going to put up some money and might even one day hope for some return. Would both of you reflect on that for a moment?
Yeah, let me dive in there. So first of all, my mother actually is more in the charitable basket here.
Okay, good.
She donated a property to a Ukrainian family.
Fair enough.
And the story there was that she had been very much hoping to take a Ukrainian refugee family into her home in the UK. But she's 87 years old and she's a little bit frail. And when she saw this product, she thought, well, actually, maybe it's much better for me to buy a house and enable a Ukrainian family to move in themselves and have their own independence. So that was a very nice story.
I like your mom. I like your mom.
So do I, actually. She's hard not to like, I'll be honest about that.
I like too.
So she was bolder than me. She was the first to put up her money, actually. I came at it more from a commercial point of view, which is what you're touching upon now. And I do think it's very important, actually, because I think from an investment point of view, this is kind of the best form of business, really, when when you provide a product which is very much in need, and you provide it on a very affordable basis, and it's a good quality product, it's comfortable and it's dignified, and it serves this kind of requirement. And I think if you can do that in a way which is also good for the business and good for the investors in this business, then this is sort of social capital at its most powerful, really. So, government funding and charitable funding, which will be available, we think, for some of the market that we're looking to serve, we feel that those guys, they should be organizing kind of tender processes. They should get, the best companies in the world with the best products in the world to sort of bid for their contracts. And they should use that competitive process to get the best quality product for the best possible price. And we're very confident with the sort of product that Alex and his team have developed within Homers, that we'll be able to participate in those processes, get a lot of business, and do a lot of good around the world.
So, and Alex, do you have the same hope of those different organizations interacting in a way that does good and makes profit?
Yeah, definitely yes. But and at the same time, we should have really good business model for this. And in terms of the product, our idea is to convert our product into something like gadget. It's like cars. You have like a cell phone. It should be really easy, transportable, movable anywhere. Because again, the question with people, how often they shift, they change the place where they are working, where they are living, etc. This is the big challenge today. And so that for them, this property, to be able to grab the house and to get it in any another place, it's really important thing. But in this case, we should involve banks to support people as they support now cars purchasing. So it's going to be the same model. In this case,
interesting.
People will buy that if they have a sustainable work position in the company, salary, etc. It is going to be really easy to obtain our house and to install it anywhere. They just in a really small plot of the land. This is the point. This is our idea. And
interesting. Interesting.
Can I maybe just add one thing to that, because I think it's very relevant also, sure, where the sort of we started with respect to helping with the Ukrainian problem. A lot of Ukrainians, of course, millions of them have left the country and are temporarily living in the near abroad, and living in, quite temporary accommodation, whether they're, hotels or living with families and so on. And this is not really a long-term solution. What we think would make a lot of sense is that the countries, the governments in those near abroad countries, they allocate a certain amount of land where these kind of houses could be assembled. Ukrainian refugees could occupy them whilst they are outside the country. And then when there's a peaceful resolution of the conflict, the family and the house can return very quickly to Ukraine.
Wow.
That will help us address, what will become the immediate follow-on problem, which is repopulating the country and building back society. So it's a very powerful solution in that respect as well. And one would hope that this would encourage those nearby governments and local authorities and so on to, give the kind of planning consent that would be required to cut through some of that normal red tape, because this is a humanitarian need and it's a temporary solution.
Yeah. Now, you're really talking about the term fully sustainable comes to my mind. That's got to be an important part of this process, isn't it? How do you make sure that this housing is sustainable?
To be honest, in the beginning, that was no idea to think about sustainability, because we wanted to react on a challenge, on the problem of people really fast. But finally, when we produced some houses, we calculated how many energy we spend for exactly this kind of production, because it takes us the only several shifts to produce 6-8 modules house. It's like 54, 60, 70 square meters indoor part, and it takes us only several days. So that is why that's really energy effective system of production. And this is the first point where we have really higher level of sustainability. It is not materials at this moment. This is the approach, how we build it, how we produce it. And just a few days for installation at the same time. And we really independent on the weather and some another moments we have sometimes when we are building the house several years. That 90%.
But if this house is going to stay with a family over time, can the house grow as the family grows?
Absolutely, yeah. Exactly. It's a modular design, and you can sort of put it together a little bit like Lego. So, as I said earlier, I've seen this being built in my garden. So, seeing is believing. I can see how easy it would be to take off a couple of wall panels, temporarily shift the terracing to one side, add a couple more modules, and put it all back together, and add sort of 25% to my living space. So, that is also quite impressive. And of course, it's also a nice way of getting people, onto the property ladder at a very, low entry point, with a view that over time, as they get a little bit more money, or maybe they get access to bank financing or something, they could sort of extend their property. So it's another, valuable element of the design is this kind of
interesting. Well, Chris, please do not expand the house so much that I'm unable to afford it on Airbnb in your lovely British.
Don't worry, you can sublet one module.
Gentlemen, it is a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you for speaking with us from Kyiv, where you're right in the middle of one of the most difficult situations on Earth right now. Chris Baxter, Alex Stopora from the organization Homers, doing some creative and fascinating work when it comes to rethinking what housing is all about. Great of you guys to join us. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, our pleasure. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Good work. Nice to be with you all. Farzana Gandhi is a New York architect and a LEED accredited professional whose work at the Farzana Gandhi Design Studio focuses on sustainable, environmentally conscious design all around the world. In fact, in some especially tough places, including now the Ukraine. She's made an impact in places like Dakar and in Puerto Rico, and has always focused on the context of architecture. So Farzana, a building isn't just a building, right? It shows up in some kind of social context. That concept seems to be all over your work.
Yeah, absolutely, Alice. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. When we're doing work in socially vulnerable communities, it's really important to be on the ground as well. It's really important to understand deeply the context that we're working in. The local challenges vary from context to context. And, the one size fits all solution is almost never perfect, right? So it's really important to get a sense from the community what really the challenges are that they are facing.
So you're a working architect, you're the boss at the design studio, and you're also a professor at New York Tech, where you deal with students on these issues. So you have all three of those perspectives. When you get started on a project, are there initial questions that you ask yourself when you don't know anything at all about where you're heading or what you're doing?
Well, I think that the questions, just like I offer my students in what I teach in the classroom, right? The questions have to start with deep analysis, analysis that can come, of course, from book research and statistics and big data to get a sense of the context and the socioeconomic situation that you're dealing with. but really it needs to be complemented with on the ground data, qualitative data that we can collect from the community themselves to understand really the needs and challenges that we are working towards, so that the solutions that we build, no matter the scale, sometimes it's a building, sometimes it's just a brochure, sometimes it's an education campaign, sometimes it's an urban resiliency plan, right? Sometimes it's a product. And really, you wouldn't know what you are building until you understand the challenges you're building for, so that you can make the most impact.
Now, do you find the clients know that in advance? They know what they're looking for? Or are they depending on you to help them figure out not only what the infrastructure or the building is going to look like, but what its purpose ought to be and how it is it can serve local needs that you guys have identified?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so clients often have a certain idea of what they're doing or what they'd like to see. But our job is to educate the clients, right? We are there to let them know how impactful their project can be. And sometimes there's a phase called pre-design where we, quote unquote, program with them. We give them a sense of, here are all the different things that your building or your project can offer the community, and this is how we can get that done.
So you've worked in some perfectly lovely, bucolic places, but you've also worked in some pretty tough ones. I mean, Ukraine, obviously an example. I mean, we're in the middle of a hot war in Ukraine right now. I mean, how do you approach that? What special challenges does that give you beyond what I guess has got to be a fear that you don't want to build something beautiful and then have it be blown up tomorrow night, do you?
Well, that's certainly a challenge in the Ukraine, and to be honest, right, we're just scratching the surface in Ukraine. But I do have extensive experience on the ground working in post-disaster scenarios. Many of them are scenarios and locations that have suffered from long histories of climate vulnerabilities and social injustices. We've worked quite a bit in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, starting to build infrastructure and homes there, as well as in socially vulnerable contexts like informal settlements, for example, in Ecuador. And each come with their own specific challenges that we have to take into account.
I would love for you to take an example, and whether it's Ukraine or one of those other spots, and just walk us through a little bit of your process. I mean, is it important that you go there first? I mean, can you do this stuff at a distance? Do your students and colleagues get involved? So what are some of the mechanics that set you apart from maybe what a traditional out of the box architect might do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to go there. I've had the privilege of going there for projects that I've taken on in practice, but I've also taken students with me, and these are life-changing experiences for the students. I think that taking what you learn out of the classroom and actually bringing real world experience to the students is absolutely remarkable. So, for example, we've been quite a bit involved in Puerto Rico, as I said, right? And Puerto Rico is an example of a place that not only suffers from environmental challenges, but social injustices, right? A lot of the situation that they find themselves in is because of long histories of disinvestment, from local governing agencies and all sorts of things, right? And so what we do is we start by talking to people. We get on the ground, we assess the situation in a post-hurricane or post-disaster scenario, whether it's man-made like what we see in Ukraine or environmental, as we see in Puerto Rico. There are different stages of disaster that we have to be concerned about. The first is really just the relief stage. Relief stage means, what can we do immediately to, offer some relief and safety to the folks that are on the ground. This may include safety and damage assessment, walking around and understanding what structures are actually occupiable and habitable safely after a disaster. It may also mean that we need to understand the basic needs of food, water, and shelter. And what we can do for people that are sometimes in tents for 2 months, 6 months, and sometimes often years in places like this, right? And so, what follows with relief is reconstruction and resiliency.
Sure, but now you're talking about a role for architects that's much broader than the notion of, hey, design this pretty building and then supervise its construction, right? I mean, you're really talking about being involved from the very beginning of the process, maybe even before people know what the building ought to be, or whether even there could be a building in that location. Am I grasping that right?
Absolutely, Ellis. What we need to do as architects is broaden the scope of our work, especially when we're working in difficult contexts and challenging contexts like the ones we've been discussing. It's not enough just to go in and build a pretty building, quote unquote, right? It's important that we assess what we can offer through an understanding of a building is one of a piece of an ecosystem that we might be offering on the ground, right? So an ecosystem that's built on hard infrastructure, infrastructure that includes, water, energy, medical first aid, emergency transportation, and so on, but also one that focuses on soft infrastructure. Soft infrastructure is the livelihood of the people, access to food, access to safe spaces, access to the ability to congregate and actually be empowered to take on solutions by themselves. So all of those things are typically not what an architect goes out and sets out to do, right? We typically are tasked with simply building for a particular location and for a particular problem. Here we are dealing with an entire ecosystem. And that ecosystem also has a part to play in the future resiliency of that neighborhood or that community. So we need to do a little bit of future proofing. We need to understand, hey, this disaster, was hit now, but is this place vulnerable to future risks? And those risks should be the same as the ones that are being challenged at the moment, or they could be different. And we need to build that resiliency into the project that we design.
So here at the Global Housing Foundation, we think a lot about workforce housing, providing decent places to live, sustainable places for working poor folks, people who have some resources but not a lot of resources, and are desperately in need of decent, sustainable, affordable housing. Are there lessons that you've learned in your practice that would apply specifically to those challenges?
Absolutely. So we're doing a project where we are actually introducing modular infrastructure on a micro level. And these are, sort of kiosks that can offer everyday residents access to renewable energy so that they can charge their phone, access to medical first aid, access to sanitation, access to drinking water just by rainwater harvesting and filtering that water, and access to communications. And so when we do that project, we are thinking about cost. We're thinking about the ability to construct that project quickly, the ability to do that perhaps with unskilled labor and hand in hand with the community themselves, to actually give them a stake or an ownership in the project. And so all of those things start to make sure that the project is successful long after we're gone, right? Because these projects have a long history also of being funded upfront, and then we run out of funding, right? We run out of the ability to maintain those pieces of infrastructure or pieces of housing. And it's important that we start to understand the design of a structure like that, similar to the way we might design a new home for a person that is in need, where it's easy to erect, easy to build with unskilled labor, easy to be delivered. Project delivery is very challenging in contexts like these, especially where roads and transportation may be blocked. And so it's important that we start to build in all of those quote unquote challenges that we might actually think of as opportunities in design in the way we design those projects.
My God, all of this sounds enormously challenging. If you had to single out one thing, what's the absolute toughest part? I mean, is it the funding side? Is it getting the local stakeholders to sign on to it? Is it helping people recognize even that they need this kind of from the start thinking? What's the toughest sell on your end?
Yeah, I would say it's two challenges. One, of course, is funding. Funding is always difficult. Working across silos and disciplines is, I think, a really important thing that we need to start doing more of. We can't be working individually as practitioners or professionals or academics. We need to start to work together. And we started that conversation with the idea of collaboration. And then that collaboration needs to extend to collaboration with the people themselves. And all of those present various challenges, right? So on the community side, it's about trust. It's about making sure that your process is transparent, especially where there's history of disinvestment. People are not inclined to necessarily buy in to what you might be offering, especially if you're coming in from the outside. And so most importantly, it's about having local partners that you can piggyback on and actually ensure that you are reaching the audiences that you are trying to reach, right? And so that level of trust building requires time, right? It requires being on the ground, both at the beginning or before the project even starts, during the project, so you can get feedback from the community and make sure that what you're doing is something that's appropriate. Not only for meeting the needs that they are challenged with, but also meeting cultural needs and local needs that are specific to that community, right? It's oftentimes quite quote unquote colonizing for quote unquote Western architect or someone to come in and fly in and start to sort of do a top-down approach. And so it's really important that we work bottom up. It's really important we respect the cultural differences, the construction techniques that might be local, the material knowledge that the folks come from that are on the ground, actually understand what is appropriate from the bottom up, right? And all of those things are quite challenging. And I think oftentimes that building of trust, that ability to work together and build networks with community as well as with other disciplines is the hardest part.
Interesting. My suspicion is that you never have a shortage of ideas, and the challenge is having opportunities in places around the world to put those ideas into practice, but always, as you say, in context, dealing with the needs of local folks and their experiences, and finding a way to meld your vision in with the vision of the people who you were there to serve. When do you sleep? I guess that's my final question.
Well, we forgot that I'm also now a public interest entrepreneur, and so I've also started a startup to bring some of these things to scale. And so, yes, I think. They say that if you're dreaming your ideas, you're definitely passionate about your work. And so perhaps I'm working while I'm sleeping as well. But, I think that's what I'm passionate about, and I think it shows in the work that I'm able to do. So.
Terrific. Farzana Gandhi is a professor of architecture at New York Institute of Technology, a lead certified architect, and the boss at Farzana Gandhi Design Studio. It's real nice of you to spend some time with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alice, for having me. Appreciate it.
Good to talk with you. Whether at home or abroad, in a bucolic American city or a war-torn land on the other side of the world, few issues are more important than sustainability. It does no good to create a brilliant design, to get local support, to actually get it up off the ground, if what you've created isn't sustainable. If in 6 months or 2 years, all your brilliant work is gone. People fall into ruts. It's just part of the human condition. We see something that worked before and we do it again, and we look at something that someone else is doing and it looks like it's going pretty well, so we so we try to copy it. Those ruts are an issue even in a new and in a fast-changing world that surrounds the issue of sustainability. I mean, you'd think that would be a topic that there'd be a whole lot of fresh thinking on. Well, one person is standing up for the fresh thinking in the sustainability world. Michael Ben Ali, the founder of the Sustainability Laboratory, has been a pioneer in fresh thinking on issues connected to sustainability in all its many forms. He has become truly renowned for his 5 principles of sustainability that really can be applied any time we're trying to sustain some important thing. Here, let's take a look at this video to give us some brief insight into the Sustainability Lab.
Our planet is in distress. Persistent, insensitive human activities now threaten every vital component of the biosphere, including the well-being of our own species. We are faced with a choice: continuous deterioration or a commitment to sustainability. Transitioning from the current state of affairs to a sustainable basis is an unprecedented challenge. There is no blueprint to guide us. We need bold experimentation with new ways of thinking and acting. This is why we established the Sustainability Laboratory, a global platform for sustainability innovations, a catalyst inspiring positive change. In our development projects, we work collaboratively with communities to bring about sustainability-related transformations. In our education initiatives, we help train future leaders to tackle the urgent sustainability issues facing the planet. And in our research projects, we foster groundbreaking innovations in technology. This is the Sustainability Laboratory, aiming to expand prospects and produce positive, life-affirming impacts on people and ecosystems in all parts of the world, joining with others to ensure a transition to a sustainable future.
Sustainability. I mean, you would think that would be a bastion of fresh, creative thinking, but not always. That's really where the Sustainability Lab comes in. Michael Ben Ali, good of you to join us here.
Nice to be with you. Thank you.
So am I right that even on a topic like sustainability, which sounds so modern and so hip and so with it, there is a tendency to just do the same old things over and over again, but you stand for an opposite view, don't you?
Well, you know, one of the problems, of course, is that the term itself, sustainability, has been so overused and abused and misused that it's almost lost its meaning, which is why we gave it a more precise definition. But for sure, we see that most of the issues that usually people tend to associate with the topic, things like biodiversity loss, global warming, water issues, all the big deforestation, desertification, all those issues are continuing in fast pace in spite of all the talk and all the discussion and all the minor efforts, I think, in relation to the issues. So yeah, I think that the topic does need refocusing and rewiring ourselves to deal with this later.
Interesting. So what the heck happens in a sustainability lab?
Well, the idea with the lab is actually very simple, and that is that the kinds of issues that humanity faces on the type of transformation that is required on the planet today entirely unprecedented. There's really no time in history where anyone had to tackle the issue of coordinating the activities of 10 billion people in more or less peaceful, harmonious, and abundant way. So there's no experience, there's no cookbook, there's no recipe that you can just follow, no experts. And if you don't have a cookbook that you can follow, if you don't have that experience, you need to experiment. And where do you experiment? You experiment in a lab. And what does the planet need now? A global laboratory for sustainability innovations. And this is, of course, very naive. I'm talking 15, 16 years ago. Nobody was doing it, so why not do it? We jumped in the water and put on the lab.
So do you have a definition for sustainability? I mean, as a layperson, I would say, well, that means that, you know, we can keep on going. We cannot run out of gas. We cannot run out of life. We can keep doing what we're doing. But I'll bet you've got a clearer definition than that.
Yeah, you know, of course, you are right. The term sustain indicates continuation over time. But that doesn't give you any indication to the kind of issues that we are facing today. And the prevailing definition that came out of the UN, out of the Brundtland Commission, the prevailing definition basically defines sustainable development as development that takes care of current needs without jeopardizing the needs of future generations. So it sounds like a great definition. Nobody will say I'm against future generation or anything like this. And of course, it provides, it has no operational meaning. It doesn't give you any indication of what is the framework under which it has to be achieved. And so I was very unhappy with that definition for a long time. And that's why I thought that we need to come up with our own. So when you think about, when you take a systemic view of things, you usually need to identify what are the kinds of underlying key variables that makes that system and how they interact. And in the context of sustainability, the two key variables are population and a carrying capacity of an environment. It can be any population, any environment, can be amoeba in a petri dish or wildebeest in the savannah or humans on the planet. And the interaction between population and the carrying capacity is not a linear interaction, is a two-way cyclical kind of interaction where the two sides basically define one another. And it's very important to define sustainability in that context, because if you don't deal with that particular, that two sides of the equation, population and carrying capacity, you're not dealing with the issue at all. So the lab's own definition, if you will, is that sustainability pertains to, I'll read it actually, a dynamic equilibrium in the process of interaction between the population and the carrying capacity of its environment, such that the population developed to express its full potential. You don't put any restrictions there other than one, without producing irreversible adverse effects on the carrying capacity of the environment upon which it depends. So it's elaborate a little bit, but basically it touches on the relationships between all these key variables. And it tells you what is the condition, that equilibrium that you have to maintain. And that's not a static thing. It's not something that you reach once and for all and go to sleep. Things change, population change, technology changes, and that means that we need to redefine where we are at every given moment.
Interesting. Now you talk about 5 principles, and without going too deeply into all 5 of them in our limited time, can you tick them off as bullet points? So what are these 5 principles that you are so famous for?
Okay. If you think about that interaction, the way populations impact the environment through their activity, when you think about the human kind of from the viewpoint of humans now, forget the amoebas and the wildebeest for a minute. The impact of human activities has basically two components. One is the metabolic, if you like, component, the physical thing that have to do with energy and matter exchange. But there are many others that are softer. They're not physical in nature. The culture, the way we look at the world, the way we organize, the governance system, the economy, for sure. All of those aspects, our value system, what do we consider important in the first place? All of those have an impact on that equilibrium. And so I thought that when I looked at all these myriad, thousands of different factors, it looked that it was easy or sensible to cluster them in 5 domains. The physical domain that deals with the energy and matter exchange, the physical part of that support existence in general. There is the economic domain, which is basically produces the framework for defining, evaluating, and managing wealth. There is the social domain, which has to do with how society organizes itself, the institutional component, if you like. There is what we call the life domain. We are one component in a very complex wave of life with thousands and thousands and thousands of other species, and we are not very good neighbors. We are basically decimating the whole framework. And then finally, of course, last but not least, perhaps the most important, the value, the spiritual component. What is it that drives us? What is the purpose for our activities? Are we predators or are we stewards? So for each one of those domains, there is a particular principle announced, and those principles are expressed not as prohibitions, but as imperatives. Imperative 1, imperative 2, imperative 3. And what it says, if you want to maintain that point of equilibrium, you need to simultaneously act according to each one of those principles.
Interesting. I see so often that economic factor colliding with some of the others, the life factor and the physical world that you talk about. We think about the debates over climate change, and we see so often people saying, well, yeah, we'd love to protect the climate, but we also need to make sure that industry is robust. Are those the kinds of clashes that you're trying to navigate?
Well, of course, the clashes are produced by the fact that we don't have a coherent system that integrates, that self-organizes itself coherently. So we have an economy, if you like, or an evaluation system, accounting system that drives the economy, that doesn't give value to things that we destroy or deplete or pollute. So we have the current economic system is out of sync with the ecological imperatives, if you like. And this is not only to say that it's important for the ecology, but at the end of the day, you cannot have a healthy humanity without a healthy ecology, without a healthy planet. You cannot poison the water and the air and create deserts everywhere and so on and so forth, and kind of and destroy all other forms of life and still be a happy kind of species. So the one of the conditions that we are saying, you cannot deal with any one of those domains or any one of these principles in separation. Separation, of course, is what is very much behind the problems. You have to integrate. So any issue that you want to pick up, you have to integrate all of those domains in terms of synchronizing what you do to get that equilibrium condition that you want to achieve.
Now, I want to test the integration of those various domains by getting particular with you. Now you're involved not just in theoretical work here, but in projects around the world where you're actually trying to put some of this stuff into some practical use. Would you talk about Project Wadi and one of the other things that you're out there involved with?
Yeah, Project Wadi Atir is a very interesting situation. It's the kind of the flag ship project of the lab, if you want. We launched it 15 years ago, and let's look at the video for a minute.
Project Wadi Atir is the flagship development project of the Sustainability Laboratory. It is a groundbreaking initiative with a Bedouin community in the Negev Desert that demonstrates a model for sustainable dryland agriculture, showcasing Bedouin tradition and experience leveraged by advanced technologies. The project's radical innovations enabled it to overcome obstacles that were previously considered insurmountable. Project Wadi Atir encourages cooperation among diverse Bedouin tribes and provides an opportunity for Bedouin women to work alongside men, even holding key leadership positions. The project's herd of goats and sheep enables the production of high-quality dairy products. A seed bank and training program returns indigenous vegetables to household use, improving nutrition and health. The cultivation of medicinal desert plants showcases Bedouin healing traditions and enables the creation of health-related products. Following a waste-to-resources approach, the site is supported by an integrated infrastructure of green technologies, and its ecosystem restoration initiative has restored a barren site to productivity, combating desertification, enhancing biodiversity, and mitigating the effects of climate change. The project educates thousands of students annually and has attracted visitors from around the world. Project Wadi Atir is a model of hope and transformation, contributing to the improved well-being of the Bedouin community and demonstrating the Sustainability Laboratory's approach to development in a way that is replicable and scalable in arid zones throughout the world.
So basically, Project Wadi Atir is a project with the Bedouin community in the Negev Desert in Israel. And the purpose of the project was to achieve three things. One is to contribute to the well-being of the Bedouin community, that is a marginal community in the country. Two, to demonstrate exactly what you said earlier, to demonstrate the actual application of the principles, and then to contribute to the global sustainability agenda, the global sustainability discussion, if you will. And so this project tries to integrate and innovate in those 5 domains, if you like, in the social, in the economic, in the takatak, and so forth domains. To give you an example, in the social domain, we tried to produce some major innovation in the approach to the project. We try to organize it as a cooperative, which is not the typical Bedouin governance structure. We tried to make sure that the project does not belong to one tribe or one family or one clan, but really represents a cross-section of the Bedouin society in the Negev. So we have people from different villages, different tribes, and so on. And last but not least, we insisted from the beginning, which was quite different. We're talking 15 years ago. There's quite a bit of change since then, but even now it's difficult to integrate women, to see women as part of the team working together with men around one table. And this was totally unprecedented, of course. We've made great strides there. Today, the project team that comprises about 30 or 40 individuals, basically 50% women and 50% men. They're working together. We have women in positions of authority and so forth. On the economic side, when you deal with marginal communities, usually the approach is to deal with job creation, usually at the lowest level of jobness, if you like. We said we're not interested in job creation. We want to create a group of entrepreneurs who will develop their own businesses, run it, and benefit from them. And so the whole project tries to integrate Bedouin tradition, experience, and aspirations with modern science and technology. And so on the economic sides, we launched a number of projects because of the experience with ships and goats and so forth. We basically have a dairy farm that produces super excellent dairy products. Really, they fly off the shelves. They're so good. We have a whole operation with medicinal plant that you've seen, using desert medicinal plants that are known basically to Bedouin healers, shamans, if you like. And we grow them in a large piece of land under cultivation to produce a whole range of health-related product and so on. We have, as you've seen, a major educational activity there. We basically run an agricultural school that teaches about the environment, about sustainability and so forth to all the schools in the region and so on.
Well, what strikes me about all of that is how integrated it is into the local Bedouin culture there in the desert in the Middle East that you're dealing with. And it makes me wonder, I mean, I know you've got projects elsewhere in Costa Rica and in other spots, how different that must be from culture to culture. In fact, let's take a quick look at this video about another one of the efforts.
The northwest of Costa Rica once was a vibrant, dry tropical forest. Intense logging turned it into a savanna, which created repeated droughts. A community called Martina Bustos lives in this dry, hot, degraded land. The community consists of about 2,000 people, most of whom are migrants from Nicaragua. They reside in substandard conditions, with limited access to clean water and without titles to land. Lack of opportunities for skill development and barriers to employment mean that some make a living by scavenging a landfill. With weak community organization and limited access to education, their future is unclear. In 2014, the Sustainability Laboratory and its partners at Earth University started to engage with the Martina Bustos community, working with the community to develop forward-looking leadership and craft a holistic development plan through a collaborative design process rooted in the sustainability framework of the Sustainability Laboratory. This plan is called Project Transition. It aims to improve the well-being of the community, regenerate the surrounding environment, and become a model for migrant communities worldwide.
So, Michael, it strikes me how different that is from your efforts in the desert. Am I reading that right?
You're completely right. Of course, every project, every location, every situation has completely different aspects that you need to take into consideration. What remains the same, what remains the constant, is the framework itself, the sustainability principles. And they have to receive manifestation under different conditions, dealing with different issues, and so on. So Martina Bustos is a very interesting community in the Guanacaste region of Costa Rica, the northwestern province. It's a community of undocumented Nicaraguan refugees who live in really awful conditions, as you could see. And we call it Project Transition because the idea is to work with that community and transform completely the whole situation there, from the legal issues, the land tenure, the legal status, all the way to housing, which we'd like to see developing actually housing units that fits that environment and that community, replacing all those really very, very difficult to live in shacks, and deal with everything, the infrastructure, providing people with some skills, dealing with the health situation and so forth. This is a project that is developing much more slowly for many reasons, but we are moving. At the moment, we are focusing on the questions of obtaining the piece of land where that community squats over, obtaining it legally so we can basically, we are creating a trust there that will receive that land and manage it with that community on their behalf. This is the first step that has to happen there.
Interesting. So
but it will
Michael,
also have all the aspect of economic development and technology. We need electricity, we need water, and all the other stuff that is.
Of course. Let me put your sustainability principles into the hot seat for a moment. We've been talking a lot on our broadcast today about Ukraine. And I don't need to tell you about the sustainability challenges in the war zone there. Are there insights that you have achieved through your work that could bring a more sustainable perspective to how we in the West are watching that so closely?
We are obviously not talking about the situation in Ukraine in general. We are talking about I assume, the housing projects that you're trying to promote.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's very interesting. Different times in different eras in architecture were driven by some iconic images. If you think of the whole modern movement in architecture, think about Corbusier, for example, and his books from, I think it was 1927, Towards a New Architecture. He declared that a house is a machine to live in. In other words, the machine was the iconic metaphor for a new approach to architecture. This was, of course, inspired by all the major technological innovations of the early 20th century, aviation and the big passenger boats, the elevators, concretes, and so forth. And there are other architects in that period that following that kind of were inspired by the new technology, the whole idea, the whole concept of modernism that Mies van der Rohe, for example, tried to rationalize in his very pure, cerebral architecture. Frank Lloyd Wright, that was looking for a particular American kind of icon with the notion of organic architecture. Of course, Buckminster Fuller, who really realized, in fact, this icon of the machine to live in. So all that the technology of that time drove a completely new concept of housing, of architecture, of urban planning, and so forth. If you were to ask me what should be the icon of our days, I say it should be eco-design. We have to really mimic nature. We have to see every aspect of what we design, whether it's a component of a house or a whole living unit, a house or a city, as an ecosystem. And as an ecosystem, it has to be able to maintain that equilibrium that we talked about earlier. So when you talk about a housing unit, even, if you want to not just provide a shelter in a case of need, but also to contribute to the question, how should the shelter of the future be? You'll have to deal with issues of management of water, of waste, energy production, all of those kind of things, the well-being, the psychological well-being of humans. How does that house fit and interacts with its environment? How can a house become more of an organism rather than a physical entity that you drop something? How can it breathe its environment? How can it contribute to it worries, and so on. I don't know if that's what you wanted to hear.
No,
but,
it is.
This
and
is
all
how
of
I
those
would.
things, which, yes, well, it's a good framework. What strikes me is that yet all of those things are more complex in a war zone. You can have a living, breathing house, but if you send a mortar shell through the roof, it's going to have a big impact. If you have to move that house 20 miles down the road because the once peaceful area became a war zone, that has another kind of impact. And the supply chain issues. It's so interesting that your framework accommodates all of those challenges. Am I right?
I think so, with all modesty. But you can even be more ambitious than say, how can I produce a house that will be such a fantastic model of a living paradise that no one will want to attack it or throw bombs on it or whatever.
Well, that's why you founded the Sustainability Lab. You get right back to first principles and the most basic questions imaginable. Michael Ben-Ali, I really appreciate you spending this time with us today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Now is the time I want to make a call for action. If you've listened to some of these fascinating people today and said, you know what? That's amazing, the stuff they're doing, but how can I help? What can I do to get involved? How can I lend my own efforts and expertise and resources to try and advance some of these innovative efforts in Ukraine and around the world? Well, we have two ways you can do that. One is you can donate. We always need funds to help support these efforts. The best way to do that is to go to globalhousing.org and click the donate button. That money will go right to the cause, and 100% of those dollars, as Sharon Young made clear, will go specifically to these worldwide and much, much needed efforts. We also have something called the Ambassador Program. For those of you who have expertise in these fields, whether it be in the private or the public sector, in the building world or other aspects of housing, but if you are able and willing to donate some of your talent and energy and expertise, we invite you to become an ambassador to the Global Housing Foundation. The best way to do that is go to globalhousing.net and click the ambassador button. And all the instructions will be there. These addresses up on the screen so you can remember them. Globalhousing.org to donate, globalhousing.net to join the Ambassador Program. Ellis Hennigan saying thank you so much for joining us today on this very important discussion at this very, very difficult time. We'll see you real soon.